Hey guys, welcome back to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. I am your co-host, Ray Russell. Been away for a couple weeks getting over some illnesses, but I am back. And Bob, I hope he's doing fine. We're going to find out on the other side. Right now, let's welcome him back, Mr. Bob Roop.
Well, thank you, Ray. And man, it's good to hear your voice and know you're, back among the land of the living.
I'm about 95%. Well, I appreciate that.
Well, 50% of you is better than 100% of a lot of people I know.
Well,
so,
that's debatable. I don't know, but I appreciate that.
Believe me, I went into detail about these people I'm thinking about, But
I have a feeling we're going to talk about some of those people today. But just call it a hunch. I don't know.
But no, it's good to be back. And I miss our interaction when we're doing these programs. But, I do enjoy very, very dearly being able to, get my stories out there. And it's not being an egomaniac. It's very rare that people get to do something like that. You have to have done something in your life that it'd be one thing if you had, climbed Mount Everest or, you've done something that's very, very unusual. You could have a podcaster, but, to be talking about your own life in a particular sport, it wasn't being done like 15, 20 years ago. Not to my knowledge, it might have been, but certainly on a much smaller basis. So yeah, this is really great, and I'm glad you're back. I'm glad you're back. Welcome back, my friend.
Well, thank you. And normally, I have tried to keep a show in the can for most of my shows, so I was still able to drop a few shows last week, but unfortunately, we're all caught up, so there was no Bob Roop show to drop. So I apologize that we missed a week, guys, but we are back and we are ready to roll. We are still in Knoxville, Tennessee, and we're going to get to that in just a minute. But first, I want to give a big shout out there to one of our good friends, Benji Fido, Benji Sebastian. I know you've talked to Benji in the past, and a super shout out to his son, Antonio.
Well, yeah, Benji and Antonio. The best to you, my friends.
Yeah, it's I talked to him not too long ago on Facebook, and I told him I'm going to give you a shout out because I know he listens and he loves you, Bob. Super fan, Benji, of one Bob Roop. And you talked about just a few minutes ago that you're lucky enough to have a program where you can talk about so many things that people want to hear about. And that's true. I can't tell you how many people come to me whenever there's not a show and say, "Where's Bob Roop? Is Bob okay? I really missed the show this week." Or there's people when the show does drop that go, "Oh man, I love listening to Bob Roop. I love listening to the program. I just love the old stories. He's a great storyteller." And I said, well, you know what? I enjoy it too. I'm lucky to be part of it, and just lucky to kind of dissect your career with you, but not just your career, everything around you, all the different talent and promoters and everything that you encountered throughout life. So it's not just what Bob did in the ring tonight. It's what maybe everybody on the roster was doing around this time, if we have stories to share. So hopefully we have a few more this week.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, that's great. The other side of that, or in addition to it, is my wanderings off the beaten path that we're supposed to be on.
No.
Miles off the path. But, I get to talk about my values and my personal interests and all kinds of things, not just exactly what happened in wrestling, but also kind of a backstory about because some of these people that are listening to this might not have even been born by the time I finished my career. Mm-hmm. So what we're talking about is also to give people, and even people who did watch me, didn't know me personally, so a chance for them to get to know who is this guy Bob Roop is talking to you. Who is he? It's not just some guy that was a wrestler. I'll try to give out, again, I tell the stories, and I try to give an idea of kind of what my value systems are so people can get an idea of what kind of person they're listening to. I want people to respect me and to trust me and to, feel that what I'm saying is, at least to my own knowledge, is truthful. So that's important. And I'm grateful to you, Ray, for letting me venture off the beaten path so often in that pursuit. So, which I just did again. But
try to get everybody to know the man, Bob Roop, not just the guy that was wrestling in the ring once upon a time. There's more to life than just the wrestling ring, believe it or not, guys. But we're going to go back to Knoxville this week, Bob. And, it's been a few weeks, so I apologize if I rehash anything that we've already discussed over the last couple episodes. We're in 1979 now, so you know what that means. It's coming very soon, guys, and I'm sure we're going to start discussing it to some degree before the end of this episode. And I'm talking about the Knoxville Five, or at least the allegiance that you guys formed and decided, you know what, we can do better. Let's try to do better. Let's do our own thing. But before we get there, I just want to look at some of the house shows, some of the Knoxville shows and things like that leading into your departure from the territory.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, so we go back, and if you said before we went on air, you actually listened to the last two Knoxville episodes before we got going today, which is great because I have not had an opportunity to go back. So again, I'm a little off this week, guys. I apologize. Usually I'm right on the money. So there's a couple names still lingering around here on the roster at this time that I'm not sure if we discussed or not. So I'm going to drop them to you here. And if you did mention them, or if we did discuss them in the last couple episodes, just let me know, Bob, and we'll move on.
Okay.
I noticed a name that pops up here near the end of your booking run in the spring, maybe late winter of 1979. A familiar name, Dean Ho, who you had met and worked with in San Francisco. And it looks like since you were a booker, I'm assuming Dean gave you a call, or I don't know how that worked out, but it just seems kind of coincidental that a guy you worked with when you booked in San Francisco shows up here while you're in Knoxville.
Yeah, I don't remember the specifics, but if Dean was there, obviously I brought him. I do know that. I remember working for him with him in California for Shire, and he was a great guy. He was a really, really fun guy, good sense of humor. We did a great thing in California with Shire. We did the ukulele, my grandmother's 200-year-old ukulele. $17 thing I picked up, or Smirnoff did. One of us got it, and we did good business with it. I mean, that created an angle between him and Alexei Smirnoff, which showed me that if he had an angle, because Dean was a good interview, but he was such a nice guy that he was a babyface. You know, I mean, in life, he was a really good, cheerful, friendly, well-rounded, solid type personality. Just a good-spirited guy. I could see why it would really be hard for him. I'm not saying he never worked heel, but he was a natural babyface because he was literally a good guy. A lot of the guys that are heels, they have at least, let's put it this way, when they do the like in the movies or on TV, when you're looking at videos, they have the little, on one shoulder, they have the little good guy, and on the other shoulder, they have the dark bad guy. And a lot of people manage to keep that dark guy invisible, or keep him like in real small proportion to the good side of him. But I think sometimes, I'm not saying that all heels have a bad, or acting out a part of their character or personality. Not at all. But I think that having the ability to at least act it out means that you've been in company with that side of your personality.
Correct. And if you can pull it off, right?
Yeah, and I don't think Dean spent a lot of time in his life. Here I'm doing Dr. Psychobabble. I'm doing an analysis of Dean 50 years later. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, the way he combed his hair, I could tell he was a good but he was a good guy.
Well, he was one of those guys that when you go back and watch footage, he smiles and just kind of lights up the TV screen. Not to sound hokey, but he does give off that personality of just, I'm not going to buy this guy as a heel. Not saying that somebody couldn't have made it work somewhere, but basically you had him as a baby face in San Francisco. He was a good hand. You knew he'd be great to deal with. You wouldn't have any issues with him. And so he's out here in Knoxville now. And it was kind of cool to see him pop up like that.
Now, not to say that he wouldn't have been, if I'd booked another year there or two there for Fuller, not to say he wouldn't have been a main event babyface, but we didn't have time because it wasn't that much longer before, everything went south. But yeah, he was a good hand. He called looking for work. You need to change your talent. I mentioned on an earlier episode that having to give Bill Hickerson and Dennis Condrey their notice, not for anything. Actually, they'd been too good because they'd gotten over so strong and they'd been used to such an extent that they'd done 2 or 3 programs, and they were in the law of diminishing effects. Rather than keep them there another 6 months and have them just totally dead by the time they leave, plus they're not drawing that well. It's better to move whoever it is, philosophically, generically, it's put that way, not but just these 2 guys, but any talent. If you see them get to that point, it's better to have them go out for a while, 6 months, a year, whatever, and come back. If they come back, they'll be stronger when they come back than if you just wring them dry. And that was another problem they had there, and all the Welch Fuller type promotions. That was a problem they had because they had so many family members that wanted to stay there forever. None of those people wanted to travel. They didn't want to go to California to work. They wanted to stay in the South. In their territory, like out of Mobile, they had to drive to different towns, of course.
Right.
But they could own a home there. Their kids could go to school there, their whole K through 12, and never have to leave because they didn't want to leave, and they could stay there. Well, if you're going to have 3 or 4 people who are named Welch or Fuller that are permanent, then you got to rotate the rest of your talent if you're going to keep drawing, because something's got to be different. That was the way it had been with Ron Fuller, too, because he had him and Robert. They were mainstays for a long time. Jimmy Golden was part of their, and not that this isn't a slur or any kind of detraction on Jimmy Golden. It just happened to be part of the deal. He was also someone who was figured in, so to speak, kind of a relationship, having an end with the promoter, so to speak. Not that he was a stooge, he wasn't, but he was figured in. So you have all these different people that, so there's 3 baby faces, 3 main baby faces that are all been there a while, and there's no sign of them going anywhere anytime soon.
Right.
Well, Robert did leave. Maybe that might have been, we talked about it last time, that might have been another reason why he left, was to open up a spot and get somebody new in there. Plus, he had a job he could do down there in Pensacola or Mobile, wherever he was in this promotion. Yeah, so it was there was room for Dean, and I was glad to have him. He was a good talent, good man, someone you like being in a dressing room with. And walk into a dressing room, and not that it wouldn't be like everybody in there's your stooge, because I didn't like stooges, but everybody in there gets along, and you get along with them well enough that they don't feel a need to have to try to curry favor with you or me. Just, hey, we're all in this together. We're all going to do the best we can, and we're going to have a good time. We're going to have a go. We're going to go home and go to the bar, whatever, have a good time, and do it again tomorrow. So that was kind of my attitude. And Dean was the kind of guy. Now, if you had a bunch of guys that was another problem with going back a second to having the guys who were figured in, who'd been there a long time. Well, to them, even as the booker, I was just another guy that came along that just happened to be the booker. And they could say, well, I'm going to be here even if I have to leave out for 6 months to go to Pensacola or whatever to get a new, so I can come back and get a new start here. I'll be here on and off the rest of my life, and Roop's only going to be here for however long he lasts as booker or whatever, and then we might never see him again. So that creates an attitude. Now, what importance does that have? What does it mean? What it means is that when you're talking to people, what are they thinking? Do they have respect for you? Do they value your authority to give them orders? Tell them what to do, and that's important. Dean was the guy I knew I could count on, would do whatever I wanted him to do. So that was another reason why I was glad to have him.
Now, I don't remember if I mentioned this name yet, but it was really big for me, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about him. The Canadian Bumblebee, I believe, is how he was brought in here. But Jerry Crusher Blackwell, one of the most agile, they say, they throw the term the best big man in the business around a lot, but Jerry Blackwell may have been the first big man to really move around the ring.
Yeah, he was, I used to say big man. He was about 5'6", but he weighed about 3.
He was wider than he was tall. That's true.
Yeah. What you see is not what you get, because the guy could keep up, and, he was very agile. He was quick. He was strong. He could move like, again, he would be one of those guys. I think in another show we talked about Chris Taylor, where, looked like just like a great big fat guy, but it's a fat guy you really don't want to mess with.
No, definitely not.
Has to kill you in about well, first of all, someone like Taylor, well, even Jerry Blackwell, all you need to do really is fall on you to hurt you. You fall down, he plops on top of you, you're going to break something. Something's going to break. So then on top of it, they can do things to you, drop kick you. And yeah, Blackwell was, and also he was good to have on the crew because he was pleasant. He wasn't a big talker or anything, but he could hold his own, and he was nice to have around. We worked at Angle. We had talked about the big crate we had on several shows.
Right.
That crate was basically designed for him. We had talked at one show about putting Andre in there. Andre would have had to lay down to be in that crate because he was just tall. Jerry Blackwell could have sat on a chair, and you could have closed the crate, and he had, maybe even stood up. But
you guys got a lot of use out of that crate. You got your money's worth. Wherever you found it, however much you paid for it, whatever the case may be, you guys definitely you know how to get your money's worth out of that thing. But yeah, was that the original angle, the original use of the crate, as far as you remember, is Jerry Blackwell coming out as the Canadian Bumblebee? Yeah,
that was the original use of it. And again, it's something that Ronnie and Malenko between them came up with. And I listened to those earlier shows, and I'll reiterate what I was feeling from listening to it was we were trying to go in a different direction to get away from blood and guts to get in more show business stuff. See, and here's the major difference. The thing I talked about where Buddy Fuller wanted a way to get Jack Briscoe over when he was down there in Florida as helping out in the office. And his idea to get Jack Briscoe over was to have Jack Hardway punch this guy on television. This poor sucker that went for it. I never saw the guy before. I never saw him afterwards. Never heard anything about him afterwards. And it made Jack look just like such a brute and such a jerk. And that was their idea to get somebody over. We didn't want to do the hard way blood stuff because they've been doing it. They've been doing it for so long in there. We want to do something different. When you got guys that are great workers, and I understand that why they did some of that stuff in promotions, where you had people that were limited in talent. For example, say they're new and they're not supposed to be really talented yet, but someone they're trying to get over, well, they can't go an hour. They can't go 45 minutes through. So in most cases, they didn't have somebody good enough or talented enough to lead them through a match for 45 minutes. Mm-hmm. So they had to take shortcuts with blood and all kinds, fire and all kinds of really horrifying type gimmicks. Well, we didn't feel like we needed to do that because by not having everything so bloody and vicious and nasty, what you do is you open up among your audience, your potential audience, you include children again. The people are not afraid to bring their kids to the match because they don't have to worry about their kid being traumatized by seeing some guy bleeding down to his knees, and the kid wakes up for the next 6 months. He wakes up every night screaming. He's 4 years old, and he goes to the matches to have fun with his parents and see something like that. We didn't want to do that. We didn't want to make it so horrifying. We didn't want it to be a negative spectacle. We wanted it to be a positive spectacle where you got something that's spectacular, but it was positive. It wasn't negative, like, somebody's hand got or arm got cut off or bleeding down to their knees. Looking back, I can see why they might be uncomfortable with it, but here's the thing. All they had to do was wait till I got done or till the houses went down again. If the houses went down, then they could either make me change or get rid of me and go right back to blood, hard ways, back to the old tried and true. As long as we were selling out and are doing really good business, say in the 90th percentile, every week, there was no reason to change anything. Why change something that's working? That philosophical difference was what created really the split, the rift that's upcoming.
It's kind of funny too, because I want to go back and tell a little history for anybody listening. And we did that with San Francisco too. We went back, Bob, to kind of explain, to tell everybody what happened now. I say now, like it's 2024. What happened in 1979, we got to go back and tell what happened long before that. It's like we did with Shire, talking about how he came and he took the territory in San Francisco before you guys ever had any plans of doing anything. And people kind of leave that part out. And I want to go back, and I'm not saying Ron Fuller did that here at all, but I want to go back and kind of talk about the Fuller family, the Welch family, if you will, all the same. And Lester Welch, who many people say stole the territory from a guy by the name of Mickey Barnes before him. And so did he, didn't he? I mean, you guys got to go back, do your history. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about it, expand upon it on the next episode. I don't want to get too deep into that right now. So if anybody wants to send any hate mail to me or any questions about it, I have no problem discussing it with you, Bob, here. We can talk about it a little more later on, but I'm trying to get to the meat of what we're doing here. And so Lester Welch has the territory here. Eventually, John Kazana, I don't know if you know that name, Kazana promoted in the Knoxville territory. And he's the one who finally sold it to Ron Fuller. I guess Ron came in for a show or something. He was in town and he watched the show and he was like, man, I could do better than this. And he kind of took the idea that he could promote Southeastern, or what it would become Southeastern, with the Knoxville territory. And Ron purchases the rights to Knoxville, if you will, if you can do that, if you can purchase the rights. We talked about that off air. You said basically when you purchase a city, all you're really getting is maybe a couple rings.
Right. Do you have any idea what he paid for it?
I have no idea. That I don't know. And I'm sure he's talked about that on his podcast. So there's probably some figures out there. I don't know if they're accurate or not this many years later, but yeah, I would say that he's probably discussed that. I'm sure he recalls what he paid for it, because I think he paid the same for Alabama when he goes down there and takes Alabama. Because again, going back to kind of ties into the Welch and Fuller family, the Fields family, they're the ones running Alabama at this point in time. And that's when I think it's Lee Fields. Is that right? I believe Lee Fields and Bob Kelly, Cowboy Bob Kelly, were kind of doing the Alabama territory, and they were getting long in the tooth. They were just kind of like, kind of getting over it and wanting to move on in life. And so they sell what would become the bottom half of Southeastern, the Alabama territory, to Ron Fuller. And then he's got to go down there and try to build that up. And that's why he leaves Knoxville and kind of leaves you in charge here. So that's why we are where we are. That's why you've got the book. Ron Fuller's not there to replace his brother, Robert Fuller. And we talked about that an episode or two ago, too, as far as Robert leaving here in the late summer, early fall of 78. Robert Fuller actually left, and I thought I was right the first time around, and I went and did some fact checking here. Buddy Fuller had bought in with Jerry Jarrett. Stick with me, guys. I know there's a lot of names here. But Jerry Jarrett had left Goulis in the Memphis territory, and Jarrett had partnered up at this point with Buddy Fuller. Buddy Fuller, the father of Ron Fuller. And so Buddy Fuller calls Robert and says, we need you over here. We need a new booker. And Robert actually, I believe, leaves in 78 to go book for the Memphis territory. Now, I'm not sure where all he wrestled, but I know he was booking in Memphis at that point in time for his father, Buddy, who asked him to come over there and help him out. So Robert's gone. He's booking somewhere else. Ron's down in Alabama booking, and you're left in charge of the Knoxville area.
Wow. I thought Robert was in Pensacola for some reason.
Well, I'm not saying he didn't wrestle down there. I mean, we'll see him pop back up in Knoxville while you're booking, too. So it's not like Robert didn't get around.
But then maybe the reason Ron Fuller was in this the other territory was he was the booker.
Yes.
Okay. Well,
Ron was trying to build up Alabama. He had bought it, and now it was like, okay, I got this. I don't want to say it was on its deathbed, but it certainly had seen better days. And so Ron went down there to pop the town again. Right. And that's when he eventually brings in Andre the Giant, early Hulk Hogan down there and things like that. So, yeah, Ron Fuller had something to do down there, and thus leaves you guys in charge of Knoxville.
Okay. Well, that explains a lot of things. He wasn't just like interested in going down to see what was going on, because right. I thought Robert was booking. I keep saying Pensacola because it seems to me like Louis Tillett was. When I talked to him, he was always talking about. So Pensacola was at least one of their towns, I assume. But I was curious why, if Robert was already down there booking, why Ron needed to be down there. But if Robert wasn't down there booking, then Ron would need to be. So, right. Well, you know what? That makes sense. Ron Fuller knew that I could handle Knoxville, and he learned that within a week or two. As long as he could count on me he could still be counting on me if he just been straight with me,
Yeah.
But as long as he could count on me, then it was okay for him to be down there in the South trying to get that other territory going. I'm glad you tried it out, this history lesson, because I'm learning something here too about my own background. So please continue.
Yeah, so basically, Robert Fuller leaves Knoxville to go to Memphis. Ron Fuller leaves Knoxville to go to Alabama. He's got, another business, basically. It's all Southeastern, but it's really two territories. His plan eventually is to merge and just run everything in between. And later on, if you listen to Ron tell it, he thought with Buddy Fuller having a piece of Memphis, maybe he could have moved over to the West as well. So Ron Fuller had some aspirations at this point in time, and you guys were very successful. And he's went on to say, I've heard him, before he gets to, what happens here in 79, he talks about the great business you guys were doing in 78 and the beginning of 79. So he's putting over, the talent, the roster in Knoxville, and your booking obviously is part of that. And Ron Garvin and Boris Malenko and whatnot. So you guys are doing really well. You guys are drawing the houses. You guys are making money. Of course, there becomes a discrepancy in the money, at least by your account and Ron Wright's account. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. Before we do that, I did want to mention an incident that and we talked about this prior. We haven't discussed it on air. An incident that happened between Ron Fuller and Ron Wright. I guess it was an incident that happened indirectly because there really wasn't an incident, but it leads to what we're about to discuss.
Okay.
And so basically, from my understanding, the story goes, Ron Fuller purchases Knoxville. And even his own family, Roy Welch, at one point tries to trick Ron and say, hey, Ron, you owe us 10% of the gate every time you run a show. And Ron's like, oh, that wasn't part of my deal. Now, Roy didn't actually own 10%. He was just screwing with his own family here trying to make a buck. So you guys want to talk about, loyalty and this and that and the other and what Bob Roop did and things like that. Think about that for a minute, guys.
I wonder where these guys learned how to steal money.
But so Ron, and I guess Roy just lets it go. He didn't keep pestering him because, had it been like non-family, I have to imagine Roy Welch would have shook somebody down for that 10%, but it is what it is. And Ron Fuller didn't necessarily fall for it. And so life goes on. Ron Fuller keeps 100% of the Knoxville territory as far as I know anyway. However, so we've got Goulis over here booking. And in the eastern side of Tennessee, we've got Jarrett and Buddy Fuller and Robert Fuller and whatever on the western side of Tennessee. And then you have Knoxville, and it's like its own entity and everything around it there. Knoxville, Johnson City, Kingsport, etc. Well, some of those cities were already being promoted by Ron Wright. Kazana had no interest in some of those smaller cities. Ron Wright was actually, and probably his brother Don to some extent, were promoting some of those cities already before Ron Fuller got there. Somehow, Ron Fuller claims, at least, that he had no idea. And it's possible. Everything that I've gotten doesn't say that Ron Fuller did this on purpose. But the story goes, and this is where it gets interesting, because we go back into that shady wrestling business again. The Jarretts, I Teeny Jarrett, Jerry Jarrett, I'm not really sure who, somebody goes and they quote-unquote sell a city or two, and I can't remember if it was Johnson City or Kingsport or what it was, but they sell another city to Ron Fuller, who's already running Knoxville. And Ron Fuller thinks, hey, that's great because it's within the vicinity of Knoxville. It'd be perfect to add to my territory. Makes complete sense. However, Ron Fuller doesn't realize that Ron Wright is already running that town. So Fuller goes to Wright and says, hey, we got a new town. Ron Wright says, hey, I already own that town. And so I don't really know the specifics. I have to do a little more deeper dive. We can discuss that again. This is an ongoing discussion, guys. This is not going to end this week, next week, even the week after. This is going to go on until we flush out everything we possibly can on it. And my understanding is Ron Wright, basically, after already running the town, basically what you would call owning the town, Bob, right? He just kind of buys back in. So he's buying something he already owns just to, keep everybody at peace and whatever. So he now double owns, is it Johnson City, Kingsport? Might be both. I'm going to do a little more digging and correct that next week.
They were fairly close to each other. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they were good, both good towns. Good towns.
So basically,
I'm just curious, a little aside here.
Yes.
Remember when I talked about somebody broke into Ron Fuller's apartment
and stole his safe? Yes.
with all the cash in it. I wonder who that. I don't have any clue who that could have been. I mean, I just don't know. I can't imagine Ron Wright doing something like that. I mean, why would he do that? I can't imagine why he might think about doing that.
I want to be very clear as we go along. And I question the moral fiber of, if you question the moral fiber of a wrestling promoter, I mean, that's just silly, right? So, I mean, I'm not sitting here by any means saying, hey, it's the Wild West. Do whatever you want to do. Steal safes, do this, do that. I'm not saying any of that. But I am saying, what's the old, proverb, let he without sin cast the first stone. And that's kind of what I feel like happens with you when, you guys do what you do here in 79, because we've got so many Welches and Fullers and Fields, and we've got so many different people here that have tried to take percentage of gates they don't own, sell cities they don't own.
Yeah.
I can't remember which Welch it was that was leaving a territory, and he did this twice in his life. But there was a Fuller somewhere, a Welch somewhere, that at the end of their run in a territory, they did this 2 different times. On their way to the bank or wherever they were going with that last big payday, that last gate of the city, wouldn't you believe that they were robbed twice on their way out of town?
Was this now the Fields?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting because it happened to be the last night, the last show in some territory in the South. Lester Welch was running the town. Mm-hmm. And also the very last time, years later, 15 years later, quite some time later, the last time they ran in Freeport for Championship Wrestling for Florida, he got held up both nights.
Yes.
Lost all the game receipts.
Lester.
Not with no punches, no gunshot wounds.
They were kind to. They just wanted the money, Bob.
But they stole all the money. And the Freeport thing was like $26,000. I don't know what it was. I don't know what it was in the other town, but what a coincidence. The last night running in that town, he happens to get held up. I mean, what a horrible coincidence. Poor Lester.
I want to go back. I have no dog in this fight. I want to say right out of the gate, yes, I have a podcast with Bob Roop. Okay. So yes, I know you, Bob. We've talked basically weekly for a year straight. And prior to that, we were preparing for the show for months. So I've known you for a while, and I find you to be a good man. And anybody who's ever been around you says the same thing. I'm not, you're not saying that you were innocent in life. You admit to things that you did, and we're gonna discuss that here. I'm not saying any of that, but I want to be clear too. When I say these things about Lester Welch or Buddy Fuller or Roy Welch and the things they've done, I'm not making things up. These are stories that are out there. Their own family have told these stories. Ron Fuller has told a lot of these stories. Okay, and so I'm not doing this to attack them. Okay, this name could easily have been any other promoter on the face of the earth when I'm telling this story, okay? My point is, this is what wrestling promoters would do. So to imply that Bob Roop and Ron Garvin and this crew over here that's going to do what they're going to do, and Ron Wright and everybody involved, that was the first time in wrestling history, well, besides San Francisco, of course, that was the first time in wrestling history that somebody did something immoral, illegal, irrational, whatever you want to call it, is just absolutely ludicrous. It's been going on from the beginning of time. Why is Bob Roop taking San Francisco? Why is Bob Roop taking Knoxville? Why is nobody talking about all the other guys that came into why did Dick the Bruiser just decide one day that I'm going to go take Detroit from the Sheik and run against him, week after week after week for a year or two until, they basically killed the town. It's what happens here in Knoxville again. And so that's just one instance of that. There's so many different other times. The Paphos versus the World. It's in Pro Wrestling and the Law, a great book by Alex B. Long. Talks all about Angelo Poffo and family basically suing every human being on earth that was a promoter, a promoter's son, a booker, or everybody in between. And they went up and ran against every territory that they could drive to. And nobody hates Randy Savage for that. They love the Macho Man. He's on everybody's wall, the autograph, right? Or, snapping to his Slim Jim because he's fondly remembered. He gets away with it because Dick the Bruiser was a larger than life character. It's forgotten. Who cares? If you guys did such a dastardly thing, you can't be blackballed in wrestling if you have talent. That's what they say. But if you guys did such a horrible thing to where you could never be trusted as human beings again, Bob Roop wouldn't have worked under Ole Anderson of all people. Bob Roop wouldn't have been given the North American title by Cowboy Bill Watts. Bob Orton wouldn't have been hired by Vince McMahon Jr. and trusted as the bodyguard of Roddy Piper in the main event. Ron Garvin would have never been the NWA World Heavyweight Champion, beating Ric Flair. Right. So these guys went on to become, you guys did a whole lot more after this. I want to point that out.
Yeah. And another factor, too, is that we didn't take anybody else's money and mess around with it. You know, we didn't have investors. We were all putting in our own money. And yeah, I put in about 60 myself, 60 grand. I mean, that I had, not add up to it what I lost in wages in that year. You know, it's more than that. But the thing that's funny that is news to me is that Ron Fuller's own relative tried to steal from him. You got to pay me. He was just
testing him. Yeah.
Oh my God. And he's mad. I didn't try to steal anything from him. I didn't come in and tell him, well, you need anyway, please continue. I won't go off on a tangent right
No, you're good. You're good. So basically, you know, and again, everybody's going to see this as me hating on the Welch family. I love wrestling history. The fact that they have one of the widest, you know, you go back to some of the earliest promoters here in the NWA and whatnot were from the Welch and Fuller family. So I respect that. And I grew up, it was later in his career, but I grew up, I got to watch Robert Fuller on TV, on ESPN, teaming with Jeff Jarrett and things like that. So I grew up a Robert Fuller fan. How can you not like Robert Fuller, the character on TV? I mean, he played a fun part.
Right.
And Jimmy Golden, I always loved Jimmy Golden. Even in the silly, he would come out and wrestle in long johns and jeans like he came out of a bunkhouse when Dusty Rhodes was just for fun in the 90s. Bunkhouse Buck is what they called him. So love me Jimmy Golden, love me Robert Fuller. I didn't really get to see a lot of Ron, but I love the Fuller family as a fan, as a wrestling fan. And I love wrestling history. So the fact that these guys promoted, no matter how shady and crappy a human being some of them may have been at times, I don't really fault them on it. Like, it doesn't make me angry. It didn't affect me, right? So I'm just reading history. It's like when you go back and realize, well, this president was kind of an asshole outside of, you know, whatever. If you go back and start diving into people's lives, you know, it's like, oh, well, that wasn't really cool. And it certainly wouldn't be acceptable in today's world. But, you know, and again, I go back and it's like, I'm just stating facts. These are things that happen. That's the end of that. I'm not trying to put some shit light on the Fuller family, the Welch family. I want to be very clear about that. I'm just saying I'm setting the stage for the story we're telling. And these are things that happen. That's it.
Right. I agree. Well, the wrestling business, again, nobody owns anything legally. I mean, you can't say you own a promotional right. It only applies if everybody agrees. You know, for order for everybody. At one time, the NWA, all the promoters, the NWA promoters, National Wrestling Alliance promoters, would meet once a year, and so they could all look each other in the eye and agree not to try to steal from each other's territories.
Nobody trusted anybody. That was the whole point of those get-togethers, right? It was just to make sure everybody was toeing the line, and literally the invisible lines to each territory. Right,
and you know, there was some stuff going on there too that I've learned a lot more since you and I started working together. And as far as history, it's like Eddie Graham and Dory Funk Sr. and the guy from Kansas City, Bob Geigel. They had a threesome, and that ended up with both Funk boys, Jack Briscoe and Harley Race, being world champions for the NWA.
Right.
Well, that's because those three guys worked together. They were a pack. They were like a threesome. That was if you got their vote, you got 3 votes. Well, I don't know how many promoters were there, but I don't know how many of them had 2 allies that would vote along with them. So Eddie and Eddie was a kingmaker in a sense, because all those world champions for years came from those 3 guys.
Right.
So they had a lot of power with that NWA promotion group. The Shires didn't have anybody that would do anything with him. You know, he didn't have anybody that would be persuaded by him. Not even not Owens, the guy who ran L.A. had no use for Shires as far as I knew. The fact that they managed to keep the peace among themselves for so long was remarkable to me, because again, when you're really greedy, how much money is enough? I remember that story about Shire's joining the Millionaires Club. Shire, I keep saying Shire's. Roy Shire. There's no S to it.
Right.
I apologize for all the time I've added that S to his name. But Shire joined the Millionaires Club, and he was getting a tour, and they went to a part of the club that had a roped-off area. All the other roped-off areas had red ropes. This area had a blue rope, and all the other ones, the guy that was escorting Shires around, unhooked one of the ropes, and it took him into whatever room it was. But when we got to the one with the blue rope, they were just going by it, and Shire saying, "Well, what's in there?" And he said, "Well, that's private, sir." And he said, "Well, what do you mean private?" He says, I'm in a Millionaires Club. Well, why can't I go in there?" He said, "Well, that's for people who have over $100 million, sir." And Shire's quit the Millionaire Club that day because he was back to being a punk, even though he was a millionaire. He was just small potatoes. He was a jabroni in the Millionaires Club. So he went through it. I think I charged him $100,000 to get in, so he took his money back. But yeah, that's funny. I mean, how much is enough? A little story, and again, I'm not trying to bury anybody either. A couple of stories. One of the ones Eddie Graham told me. No, it wasn't Eddie. It was Duke Kiamulka told me that Eddie told him when Buddy had been working down in Florida. Buddy Fuller. Working in the office down there, and it might have been around the time when he was telling Jack to had Jack Hardway, that poor sucker that they lured in there. But one of the things that Buddy tried to do, he had these plans to steal a bulldozer. There was one that apparently out some land that near where there's this bulldozer got left out there for a month or two. It didn't look like anybody was having anything to do with it. And Fuller came up with an idea and approached Graham about stealing it. So we can sell it for $100,000 or whatever. And Graham had to talk him out of that one. And there was another one. Graham and Fuller had some property, and it was all farmland. I mean, what do? You could buy a big piece of property, you put one cow on it, and it would be graded to agricultural as opposed to business.
Okay.
So what they would do, you see a great big 100-acre field you could see a mile across, had 2 cows on it. Well, instead of that being graded as commercial property, the taxes on that would be like 50%. It was agricultural, which the taxes were 2%. So anyway, Graham and Fuller had bought some of the commercial land, and the guy was trying to get a grading change on the land. And in order to do it, you had to have these county commissioners had to vote on it. Mm-hmm. And Fuller tried to bribe one of them. And he approached Graham. He said, "Look, I reached out to this guy about buying his boat, to vote for our land to be more, whatever was going to make it more profitable." And Graham said, "Oh, my God." He said, "Oh, buddy, no, buddy, you can't do that. Please don't do it." He said, "Buddy." Well, he said, "Well, what are you worried about?" He said, "Don't worry about it." He said, I already tried. He said, "The guy turned me down." Well, he didn't understand. Eddie just had to blink, roll his eyes and say, "Okay, well, don't do that again." But he didn't understand. Just trying to do it is a crime. It doesn't matter whether the guy accepts it or not. You trying to do it is considered a crime. And so, yeah. And again, those are stories I heard. I don't know why
it's not bribery only if they take the money, right?
Yes. But Duke told me, and I don't know, Duke didn't make up stories like that, so I have to assume it's true. And by the time Eddie was gone and Buddy was gone, and Duke and I were reminiscing about stuff, and it just kind of came up. He was telling me stories that Eddie had told him that he found was funny. Eddie thought it was funny when he told Duke, and Duke was repeating them because he knew that I still had, even all those years later, I still had some. I remembered the affectionate part of my feelings for Eddie after he was gone. I mean, he was his own worst enemy, obviously. And I didn't have any hard feelings or anything. I mean, the poor guy, I mean, his life was obviously miserable. So, but Duke was telling positive stories, but those were among them, and it was you'd laugh about well,
that's the thing when I tell these stories about, the Welches and the Fullers, and I'm laughing about, not at them. I'm laughing. Just, it's a story, right? A story in history. Right. and you're just having fun telling it. And unfortunately, you know, because what's going to happen here between you and your guys and Ron Fuller, everybody looks at it as, oh, you're attacking. No, I'm just setting the stage, guys. That's all I'm trying to do. But I'm having a laugh about it, and not in a negative connotation like, how dare they? What, can you believe this ridiculousness? No, I can't. It's professional wrestling. This is the most pro wrestling thing you could possibly fucking do as a promoter, guys. So I'm not shitting on them outside of maybe a Paul Bosch or someone like that. I could see any of these, you know, you could just interchange a lot of these names throughout the course of history. So
let me ask our listeners a question.
Sure.
Ron Fuller has knocked me. I listened to about a minute of one of his programs, and that once he got to the Tennessee Stud or whatever he called himself, I just couldn't watch it anymore. It was just so ridiculous. The character he was portraying was just ridiculous. I mean, I know who he really is. Anyway, let me make a point. I don't know how many of those shows he's had. He's been on for a long time.
Hundreds.
I don't know how many shows he's talked about me where he's trashed my reputation. I mean, he said I'm a thief and a horrible person and all these things he said about me.
I believe one of his shows are titled Treason for No Reason, in fact.
Yeah. Treason. Treason is one of the most horrible crimes you can commit, because you're not just murdering one person, you're going against your whole country. So it's a horrible crime. It's a hanging offense. You don't murder anybody. You just tried to betray your country. You're hung for it, or you're executed some way if you're found guilty. So, that's pretty nice charge there. Thank you very much. Well, I've never said anything I haven't said a whole lot about Ron's character. I haven't talked about his character. Now, I've talked about, him wrestling that guy that came up to his shoulder in Australia and making a fool out of himself. But, that was something that happened. I saw it. Anybody in Australia that happened to be still alive that was at that show, remember? Oh, yeah, I remember that. Yeah, he did look like a dildo out there. Yeah, we never could figure out what the hell he was doing. What was that all about? Yeah, some little guy from the audience came out and just made that big, tall string band guy look like an idiot. Actually, the string band guy made himself look like an idiot. I didn't make that up. Now, I want to ask any listeners out there, I don't know how you feel about me. You don't know me, and I don't know you. So it really, I do care, though, about my reputation, because I have children and grandchildren.
Sure. With
my name. So I do care about my name. But I haven't said anything about Ron Fuller, his character. I haven't called him a horrible thief or a murderer or a rapist, or I haven't made allusions to character. So I'm curious, though. I want to ask any listeners out there who maybe, especially the ones that are giving you, through you, Ray, me also, because that's it's our stories, the ones that are giving us grief about what I'm saying about Ron Fuller or any of the Fullers or Welches. Ron Fuller's been knocking me for I don't know how many years.
Yeah.
What is it? I'm not allowed to say anything in defense of myself?
Well, that's the problem with all of this. I feel like you have one side knocking and knocking and knocking to the point where that's the only story that's out there. And I don't know that even if we put everything out there, in fact, right now that it's going to do a whole lot of good, but at least the story will actually be out there, because everybody's got it embedded in their brains that, the story, the way it goes with Knoxville and you guys trying to take the territory, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's just the way it is. And then Ron on his podcast, because I listened to those episodes specifically before right when we got started here, I knew this was going to eventually come up. It was going to be part of our story to tell here. So a year ago, I guess it would have been, I went and listened to those specific 10 to 12 episodes where he kind of runs through your time in Knoxville, everything that went on post Knoxville and all of that. And so basically that's the little time frame of where I listened and I took notes and everything, because we're going to be discussing this at length as we go along. His comments, his perception versus your perception, your memories. So that's basically what, we're going to be doing in the upcoming episodes. And this one, I'm just kind of trying to set the stage. And I want to go back again. Not only am I saying that, hey, I'm not trying to knock the Fuller Welch family by telling these stories of the things they did as promoters. I'll go even further. I'll give all the credit in the world to Ron Fuller as a promoter during this time frame, because he comes in and turns Knoxville around. It was on its deathbed to some degree. I mean, it wasn't booming. Let's put it that way. And he comes in and he takes a little bit of the blood and guts, or a lot of the blood and guts, but he brings up a little bit of the wrestling from Florida, that he had learned down there, and it brings in some of those guys, and he kind of gives it a little mixture. It's still blood and guts, but there's wrestling in there as well now. Completely different from what it had been. And you guys are trying to add to that and giving it even less blood and guts and a little more sports entertainment, a little more wrestling with the capable hands you have. So I'm giving him credit for what he did in Knoxville. And I'll go even further than that. He goes down and makes Alabama into something good again. So Ron Fuller is probably the youngest NWA promoter, certainly in that time frame. And he's, got 2 different territories going strong right now. So I'll put him over right there. Now that part's going to be left off where I put him over. When somebody goes and retells what they heard here, they'll leave that part out.
No, he did good. I think in his personal life, I think he's well off financially. So he's done well for himself. I mean, what he had to do to get there, I have no idea. He could have certainly handled me a lot better, but we're not there yet.
No.
But when we get to it, I'll explain. I'll explain why he forced me. He forced me in a way. Some of the things that happened to him, he brought on himself.
We were an episode or 2 into doing the show last year, and I got a message from someone on social media, and they said, "Is Bob going to address what Ron Fuller said about him?" And I said, "Well, you're going to have to be more specific than that, because but I hadn't heard or seen anything recent up into that point. Like the oldest thing I could find, or the newest thing I could find, was all the way back at the beginning of last year. So I thought maybe it's just done. This is done. All this crap's done." And the guy turned me on to those specific episodes of the podcast where he spent a good part of 2 or 3 months on his show dogging the hell out of the whole situation. So I go, oh yeah, that's definitely going to have to be addressed, I suppose. But we had started the show. You said to me before the show and during the first episode, I just want to get this out there because I've been getting knocked for decades, and I just want to say my part. And I thought it was very respectful the way you handled it. And to that day, you were done with it. I mean, you said that off air, you said it on air. You told me I just wanted to say something about it. If we never have to talk about it again, I'm fine with that. But
right.
when somebody forces your hand, you have to defend yourself. And I think, that's what we're going to end up doing here, is just kind of getting your side and your take. And I feel like somewhere in between, maybe we can meet a little bit, maybe say, well, this guy was maybe a little wrong and that guy was maybe a little wrong. But what Ron's been doing in regards to just continuing to keep this up, because it's clicks, it's hits, it's revenue, it's monetization. So to find a topic that people want to hear about, that's what, we're going to play to. And that's kind of what I feel like goes on in regards to when he tells the Knoxville 5 story. But
Right. Yeah. So far, at that point in time, I didn't have any problems at all. Minorly, the things happening on being edited on television a time or 2 by Les Thatcher, telling the program director, the guy in the back, to cut away from whatever I wanted to be shown. I made a point after that I already knew the guy who did that. I want to say program director. I'm not sure that's the right, but the guy who ran the board back there that called the camera angles and all that. I'm not sure what he's called. I should remember, but I knew the guy because I would go back there and look at stuff in the back, and I got to know and I always treat them with respect because, they're the ones that making it happen. If they don't like you, they can take their time getting set up and all that. You're paying for studio time, and they can make it take an hour longer than you need to take because we had to run out of TV and go to a town usually. So, but I got to know the guy, and once that happened, I went to him and talked to him, and he told me what had happened. And I asked him, well, so after that, whenever I had something that I definitely wanted to get on the air to be seen, I would tell him beforehand. And yes, several times Thatcher tried to get him to change, but he didn't. So I didn't lose too much of our product after that. So
okay.
Hey, it's Bob Smith, and guess what? The Outdated Wrestling Hour is now part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. But hey, no fear, you're still going to hear the unique guests, comedy, music, authors, journalists, funny people. Who knows who's going to end up on the Outdated Wrestling Hour? Remember, it's all new and all old. So check it out in the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and wherever you get your podcasts. Listen if you know what's good for you.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here, curator of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, inviting you guys to listen to many of the programs here as part of the WrestleCopia brand, including, but not limited to, the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF project. You can also listen to the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories, whether it's Jamie Ward with Georgia 81, Roman Gomez with the UWF in 1986, or Gene Jackson covering Memphis in 85. 3 projects going on right now over there at Regional Wrestling. You can also listen to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. Bob goes back in time each and every week, covering not just his career, but countless stories and interactions with hundreds of wrestling names spanning his 2 decades in the business. But that's not all. You can also check out the Pro Wrestling Academy with the professor of Pro Resu, Mr. Dan Ginnity. Dan and I go back in time and cover the history of Japanese professional wrestling in the English language. And you can listen to all of those shows and more, all part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, located over at WrestleCopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met, from Apple to Spotify, Pocket Cast, and beyond. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to our social media guys for all the latest goings on here at the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Plus, I'm constantly adding old school video clips and pictures from throughout wrestling history. You can follow us over on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. And why not subscribe to YouTube.com/Wrestling Grenade. And of course, now would be a fantastic time to become a WrestleCopia patron over at Patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, Patreon.com/WrestleCopia, where you get so many gifts, including all of my insanely detailed show notes for every episode of The Grenade Show, Regional Wrestling, and the Monday Warfare podcast. You'll also get early access to a lot of the podcasts here on the WrestleCopia brand, where you can listen days and sometimes as much as a week earlier than the rest of the listeners. But that's still not all, guys. You also get at least a dozen digital downloads for your viewing and reading pleasure each and every month, plus random bonus video drops, and of course, the Patreon exclusive Watch Along series covering many past WWF and WCW events. And if that's not all, videocasts, also now a part of Patreon. No subscription, cancel anytime. Give it a try for a month, guys. I think you'll like the content that I offer, and every penny of it goes right back here into paying the bills. So if you're looking to support that next up-and-coming podcast brand, please consider making it WrestleCopia. Help me pay some of the bills to keep the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and all of the great shows here up and running for the months and the years to come.
Hey everybody, Gene Jackson here, inviting you to check out the Retro Wrestling Review, where each week I'm joined by some great co-hosts who help me review classic episodes of USWA Championship Wrestling, and right now we are doing week-by-week reviews of 1993. But we don't just do reviews, sometimes we get a chance to interview some of the people who were there and lived it, plus do watch-alongs. It's a lot of fun, so check out new episodes that drop every Wednesday at WrestleCopia.com, and to find links to everything associated to the podcast, you can go to USWApodcast.com.
So we're going to be discussing a variety of things, from the issue where you and Ron Wright felt that maybe money was being pocketed to these issues on TV with Les Thatcher and everything that goes in between. And as we tell these stories, it's very possible, as we go back some nearly 45 years ago, that some of this may be told out of order. So if we can kind of figure that out, we'll correct it down the line. I just want to say that in advance for anybody who is a Knoxville historian, for instance. They're going to say, no, it wasn't like that. That happened after that. I apologize. We're going to tell the story, and then if we have to rearrange the pieces later, I have no problem doing that. But as far back as you can remember, and I don't want to get into the stories themselves, but what do you remember coming first? Do you remember if the money issue, did you notice that first, or did the issues with the production happen first, with the TV issues with Les Thatcher kind of talking to the director or whomever in the back and saying, hey, no, don't air this? Do you remember what came first? Like, what was the initial thing that kind of ticked you off?
I've got to be honest. I don't recall, but
Okay.
the TV thing in the big picture was a small deal. Losing a shot I wanted, it pissed me off, but the needs of what's coming up. I mean, even after that show, I had to go do a house show, and I had to do another. I had to take care of the business. I had to do my job. I didn't have time to dwell on that one thing. Once I found out about the money going south, that forced my hand, because think about it. You already feel like you're being shortchanged with your payoff, your regular payoff. Then when you find out that you thought you were being shortchanged, the house was $10,000, and you felt like you got shortchanged on that $10,000 house, and then you find out the house was really maybe more like 12, but only 10 was reported. In reality, you're getting shortchanged on 12,000 instead of 10, so you're getting stolen from twice. And that you talk about a moral, ethical dilemma. What do you do? Believe it or not, if I hadn't been tight with Ronnie and Boris and the crew, I would have just given my notice. Mm-hmm. And people said, "Well, how are you quiet?" No, you wouldn't have. You're making $1,500 a week. Yeah, I was supposed to be making 25. So either if I can't come to an arrangement with her, I would have gone to Fuller.
Okay, and that's a big question that a lot of people ask, and they say it kind of rhetorical, like they're not going to get an answer. But guess what, guys? I have Bob Roop right here, and this is where we get that answer. I have heard so many historians, so many wrestling fans, so many people ask that specific question. If you thought you weren't getting paid what you were worth, if you thought they were ripping you off, why didn't you just give notice and leave the company? Because that's what wrestlers did back then. If they weren't happy with their pay, they left the territory. Your response here?
Well, first of all, here we are. Business is fantastic. I am making good money. I love it there. I've got time to be and have a personal life with my love of my life. There's time to go up to the lake and all. It's a good life. It was worth trying to keep. But until I found out about the money being shorted, I was willing to I had no way of knowing that I was being shortchanged, because they didn't tell you what the houses were. Mm-hmm. They didn't tell you, this was a 9,000, this was a 12,000, this was a 3,000. They didn't tell you. So you got to pay, and I'm not saying I overlooked it or I didn't care, but I was making good money, and it was a heady time. It was my second booking job, and as head booker, and business is great. We're having a great time. I love being around Ronnie and Larry. Simon and I used to work out 3 or 4 days a week. We'd go run in the morning. Mm-hmm. We'd go, there's a track nearby. We'd go run and chat. Here I'm talking to a guy that we'd run for 3 miles, and he would tell me, he would share his experiences with me. As a heel, from a lifetime of doing it, it was very educational for me. So, life was really good. And I would have loved to stay there forever. But once given notice and shown irrefutably with absolutely no possible ways of saying, no, this didn't happen. Once I found that the money was going south, I had to do something. It would, and again, if I had been there individually, I had been an older booker. For example, if I'd been in Florida, where I wasn't attached to any of where I was an older person by then, I wasn't personally involved with any. I liked everybody okay, but I wasn't buddies like with being with Ronnie and Malenko and Bobby and all that, and even Slater to some extent. But I would have just given my notice. But in Knoxville, I tried to save it. I tried to save the job. But I don't know if you want to get there yet.
I do want to start getting, and we actually discussed this part of this situation before, so I'll have to find the episode and kind of send people back for a super deep dive into exactly how all of it played out. But at some point, Ron Fuller begins picking up business and running more shows, and we talked about him acquiring towns like Harlan and Hazard, Kentucky, and things of that nature. So he's kind of expanded. You guys are you 6 days a week at this point?
Yeah.
Okay, at least 6 days a week on the road. And I say on the road like it's a bad thing. I mean, you guys are leaving in the afternoon and coming back by midnight or whatever, if you choose to come home, I suppose.
There was no need to stay over anywhere. And that was another great thing about that territory was that a lot of times you could get back and be in that bar that we all went to, which was a really nice place because the wrestlers brought in great, a lot of the fans would come in too, mostly women or girls, but and I don't mean young girls, but they had to be of legal age, of course, or have fake ID. But it was a nice place. It was fun. You were celebrated. You had a place, your own kind of bar. Anybody that would come in, I told you, heels and babyfaces both went there. Now they didn't associate it all in the bar. If a heel was up at the bar getting a drink, no babyface was going to walk up next to him and order a drink.
Right.
I mean, we would kayfabe in the bar, but we were both in there. It was great. It was like the wrestler's bar. The thing was, with those short trips, like 4 or 5 nights a week, you could be in there by 10:30, 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
And you got the done close till 2 or something like that. So you could have a few beers and dance and party and whatever. I don't want to sound like a Sheik having a harem or anything, but a lot of the fans would come, and a lot of the female fans would come and would get a room at this bar was in a motel, and they had, I don't know, 100 rooms or whatever. They would get a room, and so you could be in the bar, and they might invite you up to the room to have a joint or whatever. So it was nice. Go back to Amarillo again. You had a life outside the wrestling business. You had a life other than the wrestling business. Mm-hmm. And that was really nice. But once I found out that, about the money, I wasn't going to. Now, for our credibility, you and me together, we've talked about the reason, we just talked earlier this program, about why I left Florida. Because of the way of being paid. Not there, I knew I was being cheated. And in Knoxville, I didn't know because I didn't know what the gross was, and quite frankly, I wasn't just Bucky Beaver eager to find out. I mean, I didn't. If I thought I was being seriously cheated, I certainly would have done something. But life was so good, and I said early on in one of our first or second programs, my motive for being in the business was not money or fame. It was to have a good life and to travel. Now, I had traveled up to that point, so I don't come across like a hypocrite. Well, Bob, what are you talking about traveling? Now you're talking about wanting to be in Knoxville.
No, actually, you were in Japan at the beginning of '79. Actually,
yes,
so yeah, you were still making the rounds, right?
Yes, I could always leave out of Knoxville. I could work there a couple of years as a booker and leave for a year, go somewhere else, and come back. If I'm successful. But even while I'm there, I can go to Japan, I can go to Australia, and leave out of there for a month, and have an assistant booker or somebody who can pick it up, or Ron Fuller can come back and probably get an assistant booker. Maybe, who knows? Maybe Ronnie, maybe Malenko, but somebody to run it while I'm not there. And it's not that hard, as long as everybody's agreeable and guys are getting along and are willing to do what they're asked to do. It's not a problem. You just tell people what you want them to do, and hopefully they do it and do it as well. That wouldn't have been a problem. So the money, again, wasn't a big deal. It wasn't my major. It wasn't, some people say the only reason to be in the wrestling business is to make money. Well, yeah, if you're working Amarillo, and sorry, Dory Sr. or Dory Jr., Terry and Sr. are gone, but Dory Jr. is still around. Sorry, Jr., I'm not trying to knock your territory or your family's territory, but you have to admit, you're out there, you're living in your car. And so it's just no way to live. I mean, if you're born to it and you start out your life that way, that's not a big deal. But for somebody coming in, when you have a situation like in Knoxville, where, you've got most of your time, your private time, you've got to yourself, you're not in the car all day, 5-6 days a week, you really can tell the difference. And it's a place. So when it came time when a situation comes up where you say, well, I wonder if there's a way to acquire this territory. It's certainly something you would think about, isn't it? So, anybody out there who's thinking, well, oh, you guys were wrong to try to do that. Well, go and study business and go to hostile takeover. Hostile sounds, it's not talking about war. It's just that anybody who's trying to take your business from them is obviously an enemy to your business and to your welfare. So it's called hostile. They're not trying to do anything good for you.
Right.
What they're doing is trying to take your business away from you, but not stealing it. You can't steal it legally. You can in a way, but you can't steal it legally. You have to have at least look legal.
I look at it like this, obviously there was a lot of people during that era that were gung-ho NWA. Unless you were in the WWF area or the Vern Gagne's AWA area, you stood by the NWA. And there was just these firm beliefs that they really did own these territories, which is kind of silly. But I mean, it is what it is. And they certainly would bring in the troops if you tried to run against them. Look what they did to Ann Gunkel down in Georgia. We discussed that at length.
Right.
Again, but the big bad NWA coming in, and even though she was technically part of the NWA, they said, no, we're going to get rid of that company, and we're just going to build a new NWA here, and now you don't own anything. And that didn't sound very legal to me either, but it's, again, pro wrestling, and that's what they do. And even stand-up guys like Sam Muchnick kind of go, yeah, I know it's wrong, but, she's a girl. I hate to say it, but that's basically the way they looked at it, right, back in the early 70s.
Oh.
And that even happened later on in Japan when Baba died and his wife got the terror. Almost everybody left because how dare they work for a woman, and that was the end of the 90s or 2000 or whatever.
Wow.
Yeah, so just a few guys stuck around, but you go back and you just look at all of these things, and again, the NWA. Okay, these guys decided that I'm going to run this state or this city and this and that, and then they go have their annual meetings. And I love the NWA guys. I love wrestling history. I love the territories. Okay, so I'm just pointing out that they didn't really own anything, though. Like, they didn't own a city. They created the NWA. Somebody created McDonald's. You know what, Bob? There's a Burger King a quarter mile. There's an Arby's across the street. The WWE runs every city in the United States. Does that mean every single indie should not be running right now in every single independent wrestling promotion? I mean, it's just ludicrous, the thought that how dare somebody else decide to run things. Now, you guys are going to escalate the situation, and people may call into question some of the things you guys were doing with the whole offering a bucket of chicken or whatever the case was, and this, that, and the other. Some funny stuff, or you guys sit in the front row. And I remember listening to Jimmy Golden tell the story. He was in the ring with Dick Slater, working Dick Slater after you guys left. And you and Bobby Orton were in the front row of a Fuller show, and you guys were kind of fucking with Slater and I guess Jimmy Golden in the ring. And Jimmy just kind of tells it like, he didn't really pay no mind to it, but it got Slater. He was like going nuts in the ring. And Jimmy Golden's like, what the hell are you doing, man? You're letting them know you're getting to them. They're getting to you. And Dick Slater kind of, just lost it or whatever. So Jimmy Golden told that one. So you guys did some, at the end of the day, it was tremendous because it's great for storytelling. And I could see where people go, man, that was unnecessary, blah, blah, blah. The Poffos did it forever to Jerry Jarrett and company. They would go on their TV and challenge them to matches they knew they wouldn't show up for and fights and things like that. And it really started back here in Knoxville, I feel like, with you guys doing it to Ron Fuller. And we'll get to all of that because there's so many great things, from the bucket of chicken or the chicken leg or whatever you want to call it to everything on down the line. Barry Manilow albums and things of that nature being put on the line. So it's hilarious stuff that we'll definitely be getting deeper into. And so I want to go back, though, before we get to any of that. You talked about you were happy here. You had great friendships, probably more than you maybe had in any territory up until this point. You guys were a very close-knit group. You hung out on the boats. You enjoyed the area. We talked about that before. You guys are home every night. You have a life is basically what you're saying. You had a life and you were a pro wrestler, which doesn't necessarily go hand in hand even today, right? So
right.
You had all of this. So you're like, yeah, typically I would have just gave my notice and left, but I kind of liked everything here. We had the fans, right. I loved all these guys. We had a great group of guys and it was just hard to just say, well, fuck it. And you guys decide, well, maybe we go do something on our own. I didn't like the way this was handled. And that's where we go back to, you said you would have never known you were getting ripped off because you guys were getting paid pretty good, but I believe it was Ron Wright that came to you. Am I correct in remembering the story you told prior? Ron Wright was the one that came to you and said, hey, Bobby, I think we're getting ripped off here.
Yes. We were in either Harlan or Hazard. It doesn't matter. The setup in both was the same. And I saw it happen in both towns. I made I made a point to watch. Ron came to me and said, Bobby, he said that you need to know something. He said, he said, I know that last time we were here, you got, say, $3,000 to pay everybody, or which was like 30% or whatever. And he said, I want to show something. He said, come out here. He said, the reason he did it that night, because it was sold out. He said, a sellout here is, say $13,000. He said, it always has been at these prices. That's what it is. What's going to happen? He said, I want you to watch something. He said, this is a $13,000. He said, I've been coming these towns for years. He said, the sellout here at these prices is $13,000. I took Ron Wright. I took Ron Wright's word for it, but because it doesn't matter based on what he said. Here's what mattered. He said, watch. I'm not going to tell you, but just watch the ticket selling. And I said this before, but it bears repeating. Mom was sitting at a table. There was a mother-daughter ticket taker, a ticket seller. Mom sold tickets sitting down. She was an older woman. It made sense. The daughter stood up about 10 feet behind her, and there was a container beside her, one of those things you can stick tickets into that's supposed to count the tickets. So Mom would sell the tickets, and the daughter would take them. She would tear the tickets, hand it to the guest, to the spectator, and then put the torn half in the machine. So I'm watching, and she does that. She tears party, I think, of 3 came in. She took all 3 tickets and tore them. And then a couple of people went by. She took their tickets and just told them to go on in. She didn't tear them. And she got her right hand. She's holding something in her right hand. You can see it. She tears a couple more tickets, and then another 2 or 3 come by, and she doesn't. Well, that went on for about, I watched for about 5 minutes, and she tore 15 tickets. Well, there's 7 or 8 she didn't tear. Single tickets. So after there was a lull and people coming in, she walked up to the desk where her mom was selling. She leaned down on the desk on the side of her that where she could put her right hand right in front of her mom. But she put her hand on the table, and her mother reached out. Almost, I thought, well, what, she want to hold hands with her? And the daughter opened her hand. As soon as she pulled her hand away, Mom's hand was there. And Mom all of a sudden had something in her hand. So I'm watching now. What happened was it looked like they were double selling tickets. So, 2 weeks later, we had a show in it wasn't Hazard. We had one in Harlan. I was in the area of the building where I could see it. And same thing. So I went to Ron. Fuller.
So it was Ron Wright who came to you and said, Bob, we might have a problem here. There's something I've been noticing going on. And it sounded like the way Ron brought this to your attention that he knew this was going on for a while at this point with these ladies. Okay. And so this is the point, and you're going to get to this in just a moment. You go and you just have a discussion with Ron Fuller about this. I mean, you're just wanting him to know because you don't think he's in on it. And he probably wasn't. I'm going to be honest with you. Perhaps he wasn't. I don't know. But I could see where you think he would be. But I will say this much. You're going to go have a conversation with Ron Fuller. So at this point, you're not really upset with Ron. You feel like you're letting him know that something's going on. Yes or no?
Half and half.
Okay. So you weren't sure. You were kind of on the...
Sure.
Okay. You were on the fence. Sure. I got you. All right. So I do want to say at this point in time that there are interviews out there. Barry Rose, Barry very well, wrestling historian, Florida wrestling historian Barry Rose, and even David Pinzer. You also know David Pinzer. You got him his job with WCW, right? So these guys have both had podcasts, and they've both spoke with Fuller family members, and Jimmy Golden and Robert Fuller have been on their shows. And at different points in time, both men have stated that they knew those ladies. And they believe that those ladies absolutely had the potential of doing that. Okay, so I want to be very clear with that. They've said that. And once I get verification that I can play the audio here on this show, I will do so from those guys. These guys have no reason to just back you. Like they don't have an out with Ron Fuller, right? Robert Fuller is Ron's brother. They still get along. Jimmy Golden is the cousin of the Fullers. They still get along. They're not saying these things to bury Ron at all. They're just saying these things based on past history and their memory of this situation. Not so much you and Ron Wright figuring it out, but they're saying Yeah, that probably did happen. And I believe one of them might even have basically said, yeah, I'm pretty sure it happened. And I can't remember which of the two without going back and listening, but they said, I don't blame Bob for doing what he did. So think about that for a minute. Wow. You got family members saying, but again, I want to get verification that it's okay to play other people's podcast here on this show. And then we're going to play some sound bites, hopefully in the weeks to come. But that, that's just food for thought, guys, that Ron Fuller's own family are saying, this part is probably true, because a lot of people, they question, did these ladies really rip anybody off, or did Bob Roop use this as his go-to to create a reason to defect and create another, Knoxville territory? Oh yeah, that story's completely out there.
Oh,
this is fabricated, and a part of it is because, as you're about to tell, and you know what, we'll just say it. You have this meeting with Ron Fuller, and Ron tells you he knows those two ladies so well. They are incapable of doing such underhanded things. And so he doesn't even, according to you, he doesn't even check it out.
Right. Well, here's the deal. I wasn't sure if Ron was in on it or not. I liked Ron. He was likable. I mean, he treated me with respect. I liked him. Okay. And so when I went to tell him, I was of two minds that he didn't know about it. But, I had also heard some stuff too. The part about the safe, about hitchy-kitchy things with money. I'd heard from Ron Wright and Don and other people about nefarious type crap. That anytime you're doing cash business, without any way to check on it, there's always shenanigans, always. Very, very. Paul Bosch is probably the only guy I know that you couldn't get him to cheat because he's an honorable man. And so I didn't know when I went to Ron. But when I said it, he's sitting down, we're sitting at a table, and I'm sitting across from him, and I did it on purpose. I wanted to watch him. I went to school. Some of the things I learned in school is about body language, and I wanted to watch him. When I said that, he jumped up and said, "Oh, no," and turned his back to me. He wouldn't even look at me. He said, "Oh, no, I can't believe those girls. Oh, I can't believe they do that." I said, "Well, I saw it, Ron." I said, I saw it. One time, I didn't middle Ron Wright. I didn't mention Ron's name.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I saw it. It was something suspicious. You're taking seller or double selling tickets. Oh, he jumped up. Oh, no. He turned his back. He wouldn't look at me. Well, he said, "Oh, I can't believe they do that." Well, that's a big tell. I mean, if it was me and somebody said that, I'd look him right in the eye and say, "What the hell are you saying?" Well, how do you know? Tell me. I mean, it's my business he's talking about, stealing from me. I want to find out. Well, he looked guilty. I mean, he jumped up. He wouldn't even look at me. Why? Oh, I don't. He's raising his arms. Oh, I can't believe they do that and everything. I went to him after the first time.
Okay.
He said, "Oh, I can't believe they do it." We had a show. Now, a lot of the other shows that they didn't sell tickets at, the next time we were at one where I could observe them. And a lot of the shows, I couldn't observe them. They weren't in a place where I couldn't watch them without being obvious about it. So the next time was another Kentucky show, because you're up in the upper part of the building behind all the fans where you can look down on them. And the second one I watched again, and I went back and I told Ron the second time. And did the same thing, jumped up. Now, here's another factor. Now, McMurray.
Yes.
Was the money
referee.
Man.
He was the bag man.
He got pissed off at me for calling him a bag man. But he was the one that carried the money around. That's what the bag man is.
Yes.
Now, it's usually a paper bag, which we talked about in another thing with the boat.
We'll get back to that too.
Yeah, they put the money in a paper bag. Well, the bag man. Well, Mac, at those shows, the way it worked, Mac was the one that would come to me. He wasn't refereeing. He was representing Ron Fuller.
Right. Yeah.
So obviously, I mean, it's very possible Mac didn't know, but it's hard for me to imagine that those girls, those two, the mother and daughter, were taking $500, $1,000, $2,000 out of there every week without somebody knowing about it. I mean, how's that possible that they could go unobserved?
Yeah. I can't point any fingers because we can't prove whether Ron Fuller knew or didn't know. I understand 100% where you're coming from and you know, and any beliefs you may have in regards to all of that. And again, I go back to Mac McMurray being the money man here, handling the finances. Ron Fuller, I've heard him in the past basically say it was impossible for the ladies to steal because Mac McMurray checked the tickets and checked the amount of money and it was correct. You're saying some of those tickets were never dropped in there. It's not like all the tickets were in there and money was missing. Some of the tickets were never claimed and thus the money was correct.
Well, the only way Mac could not know about it was that the girls I saw them reselling tickets.
Mm-hmm.
My first job in the wrestling business, before I ever even started training, was to look out for double selling of tickets in Miami. That was the first job I ever had.
Okay.
And now here we're years later, 9 years later, I'm up there, you know, and I'm watching them now. So I'm not saying he was in on it, but I don't know. I can't prove any of it.
Right.
But when I tell you, I'm only telling what happened that made me.
No, and that's all I want to get out right now. You know, people can form their own opinions or whatever, but these are things you saw. And who was in on it, who wasn't, nobody truly knows. You can make, you know, estimated guesses as to he had to have known or maybe he didn't. You know, I like to think innocent until proven guilty. That's not how the world actually works. But, you know, I enter everything with an open mind and I listen, which is what I do, you know, with, you know, this whole Knoxville thing or when we went into this with, you know, talking about Shire and San Francisco and everything. I wanted to unwrap the story rather than walk in with, you know, connotations of things that have been told throughout generations now of, oh, that terrible, you know, it's like, oh, there's way more to this story than the one that's told online. Right. So that's basically what I want to do here is open it up. So first time you see it happen, you go to Ron, you say, Ron, I saw this. And he goes, oh, I just can't believe it. So the second time you see it happens, I'm imagining that's when you go back to Ron and what happens this time.
Well, again, I'm going to go back to the first time and just reiterate.
Okay.
Body language. When he jumped, we're sitting face to face across a small table, a little round table. It's about 3 feet across. And they had a drink of water, Coke or something. And when I said it, he jumped up, he turned his back to me, and he was like walking back and forth, but he won't look at me. He says, oh, I can't believe it. I can't believe it that they would do that. He's waving his arms and all that. That body language is very alarming. If he is saying, I refuse to believe it, but think about this. Put yourself in his spot, and let's reverse it. If he came to me, I'm the owner. He came to me and he said, I think these two women, your ticket tellers, are double selling tickets. I'm not going to jump up and move away from you, the guy tell me that. Mm-hmm. I'm going to lean closer and tell him, what are you talking about? Tell me, what did you see? What is it? What did you see? Tell me. Instead of jumping up and walking and getting 10 feet away from me and walking back and forth, won't look at me, waving his arms, oh, I can't believe they do that. Well, what am I going to tell him that? I said, well, that's what I saw. I'm so sure what it looked like.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't believe that. So I had to just say, all right, well, now I would have taped it. I would have, now with the camera.
Sure.
Having a camera on your hand, I would have taped it. But I didn't have a video camera or anyway. But what I did was at the next show, I got in a position in the building where I could see up close, and I also had glasses. I actually saw the tickets being taken. I saw the tickets in her hand. I saw her put the tickets on the desk in front of her mother. I saw her remove her hand. I saw the mother reach out and take the tickets and put them back in her other hand, and I saw her resell them. And I told Ron that the second time. Oh, I can't believe that. Same thing. I can't believe it. Plus, again, I will reiterate, there was nobody, I didn't see Mac or anybody sitting up there, or I never saw Mac up near the front.
Sure.
He was always somewhere else. I don't know where he was. Anyway, so what I did, you were supposed to get, let's say a percentage, say 30%. So if there was $10,000, I could ask for $3,000 to pay the guys. Well, what I would do, if the sellout, let's say the sellout in Harlan was $10,000. Now, here's the deal. The boys got paid in those towns that night. Mm-hmm. They got paid that night in those towns. Mac would come to me usually at intermission, after 3 matches, the ticket sales would have slowed way down or been, there might be somebody coming in late. Usually everybody was there by that time. So I wouldn't say the box office was closed, but 99.9% of the tickets have been sold. Well, Mac had come to me. We got a spot. I mean, people were standing room. There's people standing. And Ron Wright had told me a sellout this place is $10,000. Let's say use that figure just for making it easy to do the math. Well, Mac would come to me and I'd say, well, what's the house? He'd say, oh, it's 8,500. It was a sellout. I said, bring me $3,000. He said, no, it's 8,500. You only get whatever 30% of that would be.
Right.
It'd be $2,250, something like that. I said, no, bring me $3,000. He said, well, no. I said, bring me $3,000, Mac. That's what I'm asking for, and I'd pay the boys. Well, of course. I mean, you know what I was doing? I was forcing the issue. I was forcing Ron to deal with it because I didn't see anybody watching the box office after that at any of the shows.
Okay.
I've been told my ticket tailors are taking money. I'm going to be watching the box. I'm going to have somebody, even if it's too late to do anything about the money that's already been stolen, I'm going to make sure they're not continuing to steal it by having somebody there watching their ass.
No.
But he didn't do that. So what am I supposed to think? He doesn't know about it? I assume. Plus, I already heard all this stuff about the Welch families and the Fullers stealing money. And so here, what am I supposed to think? He wouldn't look at me in the eye. He wouldn't tell me. The other thing is he never offered, and I told him. I said, I can't stomach the idea. I can't accept being cheated out of my pay. I feel like you got to sell out there. It's supposed to be $10,000, and it says 8,500. Well, my share of the extra $1,500 adds up to some serious money. I got a percentage as a booker.
Right.
But think about this. For me, who was there for Ron Wright to complain to? Robert Fuller was running the show.
Right.
Is he going to go complain to Robert about it? No. Robert's a Welch. He's Ron's brother. If Ron's running the show, was you going to go complain to him about money being stolen? No. So I was the first one that came along that wasn't figured in. I wasn't a Welch or a Fuller or a Golden. I mean, I'm not saying Jimmy Golden was, but he was one of the, by extension, a member of the family.
Right. Sure.
I'm not attributing Jimmy Golden to this at all.
No, I know. You've never said anything negative about Jimmy Golden.
No, Jimmy was a sweet. I thought he was a real good, decent guy. And so, anyway, so after the second time, I went back and I told the guys, I'm going to give my notice. I didn't give it to Ron, but I went back and told the guys. I said, he's just still denying it. I said, I'm going to go ahead and give my notice. You want me to continue?
Yeah, so this is interesting. You said you went to the boys, or at least your boys, and you said, guys, I'm done with this. I've talked to him a couple times. He's not budging on this. You talked about the body language too, him jumping up and pacing around. And I pay attention to a lot of that. I psychoanalyze a lot of things, and I try to read people myself. But at the same time, I'm also a firm believer in just holding steady because not everybody reacts to everything the same. So I'm not saying that it was wrong for Ron to jump up and turn his back and walk around, but it seems very peculiar to me that even if he knew these ladies since birth and he trusted them with everything in the world, that if you said, Ron, I think these ladies are stealing, and he didn't believe you, truthfully, deep down knew that there's no possible way. If that was me, I still would have leaned in and said, well, Bob, what makes you think that? Because maybe we can, correct this here. Because even if Ron did not believe that no way, shape, or form those two ladies could possibly do something like that, at the very least, if it was my family or my friends, I would say, well, Bob, why do you think that? Because I'm telling you, these are great people, and I want to know what's going on so I can kind of try to figure this out. And so nobody's questioning this anymore. And he kind of wants to shove it to the side. And now we're at a point in the story where it sounds like, and we haven't gotten there completely yet, but it sounds like you're going to tell me something different than what I've heard. And you say that you went to some of your guys and you said, guys, I'm going to give my notice. Ron Fuller is not wanting to do anything about this money issue. And so some of these guys are on guarantees, really good guarantees, like Ron Garvin, for instance, right?
Right.
And they seem to side with, what's about to go down here very shortly. But so you're telling me that you go in and you say, guys, I'm going to give my notice. What happens from there?
Okay, I'm sorry to throw you off the track here.
No.
One detail is pretty salient detail.
Okay.
Ron Fuller never asked me for details. Not one question.
Okay.
Not one question about
the ladies.
Okay. About the ladies. Not one
that
question.
is just that just seems like, well, it's like, you and I hate to liken it to something like this, but it's the first thing that comes to my mind. You watch these true crime shows and somebody goes, so and so died, and their response is, oh, it's not how did they die, right? And so that's
right.
And again, I'm not trying to liken this to someone's murder by any means, but that's just something that popped in my head when you say, I told him they were stealing and he didn't even ask me how. So yeah, I see where you're going with that. Okay.
Well, neither time. I mean, I went to him twice, and neither time did he ask me any details. And I said I saw it. He didn't ask me details. I said, well, this time, the second time, I saw it the first time. I watched it in detail the second time. I'm telling you, it's happening. He didn't ask. Well, what did you see? He just waving his arms, wouldn't look at me, head down, walking back. Oh, he's all bothered and upset. And he wouldn't ever come back to talk to me. He's walking back and forth, looking like he wants to run out of his sliding glass door. And I said, all right, well, if that's, I didn't give my notice there because I wanted to talk to Ronnie and Malenko first.
Okay.
But I was driving back. Ron's place from mine was a 10-minute drive. I went back to Malenko, and Ronnie and I lived in the same apartment complex, and I got together with them, and Malenko lived right above Ronnie, so I was able to get the three of them together without worrying about kayfabe. And
you told him you were quitting.
I said I'm gonna leave. I said I went through this crap in Florida. I said I can work anywhere. I was in the prime of my career. I could work anywhere. I said, I'm just not going to, he won't even think about talking about it. So I don't know if Malenko had a guarantee of any kind. But if Ronnie had a guarantee, I'm curious because Ronnie was the one, when I went back to tell him, and I said, I'm going to go ahead and leave. I was critical to them, because I was a booker. I was making the TVs and I was making the matches.
Okay.
I was critical to any takeover. But Ronnie was the one that said, I'll never forget it. Ronnie said, let's take it. That's what he said.
That is so crazy, Bob.
Yeah, he said, let's take it.
Ron Garvin's version is you guys were out on your boats and you were the one that randomly said, let's take it.
No.
So it's... I mean, the way you tell it, it seems very matter-of-factly. We talked about stuff offline in the past and whatnot. I find everything that comes out of your mouth to be truthful, or at the very least, the way you remember as far as a wrestling angle or something goes. I don't find you never try to steer me wrong on any conversation we ever have. And the way you're telling this, the way it's naturally being told here, I have to say, that sounds, very peculiar. That when Ron Garvin's been asked about it, since this time he's mended fences with Ron Fuller, so that may have something to do with it. I'm not trying to question the integrity of Ronnie Garvin, but it's kind of interesting because the story goes from Garvin's point of view that you guys were out on your boats, which at this time of year, I don't know how the Knoxville weather was, but and you were just sitting there and out of nowhere, you just blurt out, let's take the town or let's take the territory or something along those lines. So you're saying you go back to the apartments and you said, guys, I've had enough. It's another territory I'm about to leave. So you were gung ho with just moving on, which is a lot of people's question. Why didn't he just leave the territory? And so now you're saying that when you get back there, Ronnie Garvin says, why don't we just take it? So by all accounts, everybody agrees it was greed at the end of the day. Ron Garvin said, I was making this much money, but I thought I could make even more money if we, so I can see why you would, Ronnie would come up with that idea because he's saying, well, I'm already making this and I'm the draw here. Ronnie Garvin was the man of the territory at this point. He was the top babyface. Yes, he was. He was
Junkyard Dog, Dusty Rhodes of Knoxville, yes.
Yeah.
But counterpoint here, as far as giving myself some credibility, I hope that if I come across as having any intelligence or common sense at all, think about this. What had happened to me 4 months before I came to Knoxville? What had happened to me? Where had I been? I believe I'd been in California trying to go opposition and got caught and got fired and had to worry about, and, you think I'm going to do that again? I'm going to.
So it wasn't really on your mind, even though people have basically, you're the one that made the accusation in regards to the money when it was Ron Wright who brought it to your attention, and you took it over from there. It's, admittedly, you were like, all right, Ron, thanks for pointing that out. And he doesn't even really tell you what happened. You kind of figured it out on your own. You've seen it happen. You were told to check for that. You said in Miami prior. So you kind of knew what you were looking for there. You saw the scam, allegedly. And so that's where that comes about. You tell Ron Fuller he doesn't really want to do anything about it, even discuss it at this point. So you say, well,
talk about it.
Well, I'm done here because this is working on a percentage of my booking, fee. I get paid off of the percentage of the gate. And so now you're not making maybe necessarily what you should be. And so you're like, you know what? That's fine. I'll move on. Because at this point, you're not in the doghouse. You've already moved on from San Francisco. You've proven yourself again as a booker here in Knoxville because you guys are doing great at the houses. I mean, you're getting help. Don't get me wrong. Ron Garvin and Malenko are playing a factor too. They're giving you great ideas, and you're rolling with them, and you're incorporating yours, and you're booking the TV, and you're doing the house shows and things of that nature. So you called it a brain trust before, but your name is out there. You're on top of the cards. You're doing a great job. You're a top heel once again. You're booking. So if you leave now, you can likely find another job pretty easily. And even if you don't want to go back there, you always have Florida to fall back on if need be, right? So it's not really a big deal. But you say Ron Garvin says to you, let's take the town.
Right. Well, I'm a little aside here. Why I thought about this the other day, and I always went back to Florida. Why? I had a home in Florida. I owned a home in Land O'Lakes, Florida.
Yeah.
And that's why I always went back there. Usually I had it rented when I wasn't there. But anyway, now back to Knoxville.
Mm-hmm.
For Ronnie to say, let's take it, until this minute, I didn't know he had a guarantee until you said it. You know what it was?
I want to say, now see, I'm just guessing here because I heard it in the past. I want to say maybe $1,500 a week.
Okay. That sounds right. Well, here's the thing with me. Again, I want anybody else out there listening to think about how you'd feel. Even though I'm getting a great paycheck, and we got paid on the show in Knoxville. We got paid in cash, which again I always felt was like, every cash business. It leaves so much room for at least a little proof of how much money is actually trading hands. But if you get your payoff, even if it's say $1,500, but again, you've been out there every day except Sunday, and even on Sunday as a booker, I'm working. I've got to get ready for everything, for the next week. But on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, you don't travel on Knoxville, but every other show you got to drive to and from. Brisket, and I was a heel, so my skin was in the game too in terms of having problems with fans,
right?
Because we always tried to get plenty of heat in our matches to make them interesting. I mean, the comeback doesn't mean anything unless the people are really upset, and so we work real hard to do that. And plus I talked about Knoxville being a place you could work out. I was working out 4 days a week. Even when I was booking, I was going down. There's a YMCA in downtown Knoxville. I'd go and run and do pull-ups and stuff, and sit-ups. So I'm working and doing all this. And then after all that time, on Friday night, end of a week, you get your payoff, and you look at it, and you realize you should have been paid $300 or $400 or $500 more. There's no way. I don't know what anybody out there listening to this. I don't know how you would feel, but to me, because I have already gone through that in Florida for a couple of years, looking at that happen again, it ate away at my self-respect to just accept it, to just over and over again, just accept it, even though it's a lot of money. A lot of people say, well, who gives a crap? Well, I do. I served in the military. I raised my hand and swore to protect the Constitution and protect the country and give my life if need be. And, an educated person, I couldn't take it. I decided I didn't want it. It took the enjoyment out of all that success.
Mm-hmm.
It was like it just it's like somebody, a nice big punch bowl full of sparkling champagne, and somebody dumps a turd in the thing. It does. It just takes all the joy out of all the good things that are going on.
Yeah.
Because you have to to rationalize it and say, well, I didn't really get cheated. I just, I blah blah blah. I wasn't going to do that. So that was why it was important. I was willing to give up all of it rather than keep putting up with it. But Ron Wright, again, had been there. He had credibility with me because he'd been there for 40 years. He'd seen all these shows. He knew how much was there. But until I got there was nobody he could come to, and point it out. He didn't tell me that they were stealing money because the show before had been sold out, say in Harlan. He said, "What did they tell you the show was here last time?" I said, $8,500. He said, "Well, this place at a sellout's $10,000."
Right, and we're talking hypothetical money here.
Yeah.
Right.
So
I just want to be clear before somebody goes, "That's not what it was." I just want to clarify.
Yeah,
okay,
hypothetical.
Yeah. Right.
So I said, "Really?" He said, "Well, come out here with me." And he took me out. He said, he didn't tell me what to watch out for. He said, "Watch the lady and their daughter selling tickets. Just watch them." And he left. He didn't tell me. He left.
So he kind of left it up to you, kind of put you in, just pointed you in the right direction, and you found the way, so to speak. And
yeah, in this situation, they were the box office. There wasn't anything else.
Right. Yeah.
So that's who you had. That's all you had to watch was them. And once I saw the sleight of hand that was going on, every so often the daughter, and she was a big girl and very noticeable. Every so often, when there wasn't any traffic, she'd walk up. I mean, just on a regular basis, and lean over and let her mother like she's talking to her ear, but put her hand right in front of her, and open her hand had been closed, and open it up, and then she'd turn around and go back to the back. And she did. I watched her do it 4 or 5 times. And then the mother would pick up something in front of her, put it in her other hand. So the next show, I took the binoculars, and I saw the tickets being passed. I had proof, and at least in my own mind.
Right.
And Ron didn't convince me, and he never addressed it. He never addressed it at all. Okay. And see, that shows. In my mind, that shows the arrogance of people who have been able to steal and get away with doing whatever they wanted for so long, because a lot of times the boys were never going to complain about it. And in that territory, Ron had been used to doing whatever he was doing without because he's always having family members either permeated through the promotion or actual booker like himself or his brother. Mm-hmm. There wasn't anybody for the boys to complain to. And very few of them are going to. I'm not trying to put down wrestlers, but guys were just used to the business being like it was. You're going to get screwed. That's all.
Eat shit and like it, as my grandfather used to say. Yeah.
Exactly. And to me, we're busting our butt, and you got such joy out of going to these towns, and they're sold out. I mean, this is something that's great for me too.
Yeah.
Because even though Kevin and I turned the Cow Palace around. So that was Ronnie was the one that said it, because I wasn't about to try to go opposition again, because I'd found out, I'd had that bad, horrible experience in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling you, when you go to try to do something like that and you got found out, and the promoter comes to you and now he has you, what did Fuller say? Treason for no reason. Yeah. Well, now when a promoter finds out that you have been conspiring to steal his business, and he's in his office behind his desk telling you shit while he's firing you, well, there's not too many more demeaning fucking moments than that one right there. Pardon my language.
No.
But I mean, it's like, okay.
That's another thing. Both of these instances, and we haven't gotten to that part here in Knoxville, though. Both of these times, these promoters find out you guys are going to run up opposition or whatever the case may be. But yet, you guys, you in particular, they keep you around to finish out some booking dates before they cut you loose. So they can't be, I mean, it's not like it shocked them to the core to where they're like, I can't believe this is happening. Never in the history of pro wrestling has this happened. You're out of here tonight, buddy. No, well, I tell you what, Bob, I hate that you fucking did this, but I need you here for the next 2 weeks. Then you can go.
Yeah.
It's fucking ludicrous. that people out here forget that part. It's crazy. But I wanted to get to that point, and we got to where I definitely wanted to get to today, and that was how it all came about.
Good. And, I'd be glad to get Ronnie on the show and compare memories. But, I never would have said, let's take it. I was going to just go. I had already had that experience just less than a year before. I didn't want to go through that crap again.
Mm-hmm.
So, but when Ronnie said it, it was because he said it that made me think there was a chance.
Okay.
Because he was a big, big star there.
Well, that makes sense. He's their Hulk Hogan, so to speak. He's their JYD, their Dusty Rhodes, as you said. He was the territory as far as baby faces go, as far as drawing the cards go. He was the man at that point in time. So it makes sense. Hey, if we can go run our own thing, Ron Wright, who is the king of Kingsport, if you will, he could walk into certain cities and say, hey, I want some TV. And I know I do a terrible Ron Wright, but I love him anyway. And so, but, they say, yes, sir, Ron Wright, you got some TV. Here you go. You guys got some TV. And Ronnie Garvin's your top baby face, and you're playing top heel right now in Knoxville. So you guys got the core. I can see why you thought maybe we can do something with this. And as you said, you guys invested a lot of money. So next episode, we're going to talk about what goes down there exactly as you guys plan to evolve into your own promotion in the Knoxville territory. How far in advance did you guys start? When did this happen specifically? Maybe we won't pinpoint a day, but maybe we'll have an idea if it was weeks or months before it comes to an end there at the beginning of June. But also, we're going to talk about Dick Slater and how he comes into play in that situation. And that discussion of a union you had talked about before. We're going to talk about all of that and so much more.
Oh, good. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, Bob. Well, I appreciate you being here again this week. My daughter's in the room. I apologize for noise in the background, guys. Perfect timing, though, as we come to an end this week. Bob, thanks so much. I have had a blast. We got a lot more out of this than I thought we would this week. So we're on a roll already as we continue on this story about the Knoxville territory.
Well, I'm so glad you're back and feeling okay again. It hurts me, even though, we're new friends, but I feel like we're true friends, new but true. And it bothers me that you've been ill. I mean, I know you got a lot of responsibilities. I want to thank you, Ray, but I also want to thank anybody out there listening to us. Thank you for sharing us with us. You don't like something you hear, let us know about it. And we'll try to address whatever. Everybody's got their own story.
Right.
And their own way, and especially with wrestlers. But we'll try to clear up any discrepancies. But the main thing is that we're in this together, and Ray and I wouldn't be able to do this without you out there listening to us and sharing it with us. So thank you for that. Ray, thank you for making it happen again, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely, Bob. I feel re-energized and walking into this. I'm not going to lie to you. I was like, oh, man, here we go. We're going to tell this story. And I was a little trepidatious, as the Macho Man, trepidatious, as he used to say. As we get going
here. You're a good macho. You're a good macho man.
Mm-hmm. So,
and a good Dusty. You do a good Dusty, too.
Lots of years of training just for that, I guess, right? As we got going, man, I just felt the emotions inside me, I'm sure people could feel them too. And so, I'm happy that we're telling this story now. And I'm looking forward to continuing this as we go on. Not only are we going to discuss what I just mentioned, but we're also going to discuss all the things that Ron Fuller had to say about this time, because Ron Fuller had a lot of episodes about this, and he hypothesized what was going on your guys' end, what you guys were doing behind the scenes when this all came about. And now we're going to flesh it out and see the truths, the facts from the fiction, and the beliefs of Ron Fuller. We're going to see exactly what really went on. And I'm looking forward to it as we continue on this journey.
Oh, man, I'm so glad you did it the way you did it. The listeners out there, Ray and I have not talked about doing anything with Ron Fuller, but this podcast, I thought on my own, and first you're hearing about it, Ray, I thought about trying to address the things he said, but I just didn't have it in me to go and listen to this guy's podcast to try and get to the spots where he talks about me. Yeah. The fact that you've narrowed those down, and I don't have to listen to all of them because, as far as I'm concerned, and it's just me, I'm not saying any listeners and followers and fans and devotees of Ron, good for you. I'm glad you like it. But for me, it's just, I've seen 5 minutes of it. I've seen all of it. So I'm glad that you got that, that we can talk about it. Because I want to, after all these years, I finally get a chance. And this is not the reason I started this journey.
No.
Now that we're on it, I've got a chance to answer back to all the things. You know, sometimes it's possible that somebody says something for so long, even if it's a misrepresentation, they say it so long they believe it.
Right.
And Ron Fuller might be believing some of the stuff he's been saying for so long, especially since there hadn't been any counteracting by me saying that he's not truthful or he's mistaken. So now that part's going to happen. If he better be right about it. Well, let's put it this way. He's got his way of looking at it. I got my way of looking at it. But you know what? Just like what I said with some of the things I've told, I've got some proof that at least reasonable that someone can think about and say, well, you know, it makes sense. I can see why he would think that way or do it that way. That makes sense to me. That rings true. So out there, folks listening, you're going to get a chance to hear that because believe me, I've been waiting a long time. No, I haven't. I don't think about it because it's miserable.
We're going to flesh a lot of it out, and maybe we'll even flush some things out too, Bob, as we go along with this story. So I'm looking forward to it, man. Again, I hope you guys enjoyed it. One of the longest editions in quite a while here of the Wrestling Stoop, and boy, was it action-packed as far as verbiage goes anyway. So thank you so much, Bob. Looking forward to doing this more next week.
All right, Ray. Thank you. Stay well, my friend.
All right, and that's going to do it. Closing up shop this week. Going to be back soon to continue on the story here of the Knoxville territory. Just a reminder out there, you guys can friend Bob over at facebook.com/PoorBobRoop. And you can find me, Ray Russell. Follow me on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow me over at facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. But most of all, I encourage everybody to go over to patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, patreon.com/WrestleCopia. So many great gifts there, including early show releases, digital downloads, video casts now available, and so much more. Check it out over at Patreon. Help support the brand. And until next time, on behalf of Bob, we ask you guys to hold tight and see where we head next time. Right here on the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop.